Welcome to Adventures in Accessibility, a podcast that explores the far reaches of disability, access, and inclusion, with your host, Dana Barton.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Adventures in Accessibility. This week, we're speaking with Jim Abbott, a former baseball pitcher. He's best known for his success at the major league level, despite having been born with only one hand. Jim Abbott played 10 seasons in Major League Baseball. He played for the California Angels, the New York Yankees, the Chicago White Sox, and the Milwaukee Brewers from 1989 to 1999. Hi, Jim. Thanks so much for joining us on Adventures in Accessibility.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So for our listeners, I can't believe that most people wouldn't know your name or your story, who you are, but would you mind starting out by giving us a little bit about your background and your career as a professional baseball player?
Sure. Well, my name is Jim Abbott. I grew up in Flint, Michigan. We have common roots back there in Michigan with our families. And I mentioned that because that was a big part of my life growing up. Flint is a tough town. I know it's had a lot of negative headlines, but it was a great place to grow up. I was born a little bit differently. I was born missing my right hand.
Right.
That's all I ever knew. And so I grew up trying to find new and different ways of doing things. And while Flint was a tough town, there were a lot of great people there, a lot of great people who helped me to find different ways of doing things. There were a lot of great athletes in Flint, Michigan. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to be like them. I wanted to play on their teams. And so that drew me to team sports. And, I was lucky. I was born, even though I was born missing my right hand, I was born with some athletic talent. I took to baseball. I worked my way up and kind of improbably ended up at the University of Michigan. I played for United States teams and spent 10 years in the major leagues with 4 different teams. The Angels with my hat, and you probably see a few things in the background. The Yankees,
I do, yeah.
The White Sox and the Brewers. And it was just a wonderful experience. I didn't have a Hall of Fame career, but I had a lot of great wins and a lot of great celebrations, and I had a lot of great disappointments. But I wouldn't change my baseball experience for anything in the world.
Yeah. Well, let's start out talking about youth sports. I am the mom of 2 children that play youth sports, not baseball, but they play hockey. And you got to have some natural talent, which you've said. Obviously you had. Did you run into anyone in your youth sports career saying, you know what, I'm not sure this is the route you should take, Jim, because you were born without a hand?
Sure. I was very lucky personally. Mm-hmm. First of all, my parents were great heroes of mine. More so now, looking back, they sacrificed a lot for myself and my brother growing up. Mm-hmm. But they always encouraged me. They didn't shield me from experience. And I mean that more a playground sort of perspective than necessarily just sports.
Sure.
But that really was sort of the kickoff, because every coach I came across and it didn't matter if it was football, baseball. There were so many times where I felt a lot of self-doubt, and I felt like the kid on the outside looking in. And there were coaches and teachers and parents every step of the way who pulled me into the game. They truly did. And I get a lot of credit now for all these different, adjectives to describe my play. But the truth of the matter was the doors were opened by some really generous and creative people. And that meant the world to me.
Mm-hmm. So you use the word creative. Can you think back to a time where someone, a coach, a teacher, came up with a creative solution for you within your athletic career?
Oh, a million. I can think of so many. I tell this story a lot. I used to go out and speak to people. I don't do it anymore. I'm shut in my house these days, but I miss it. But I loved, one of my favorite things about doing that was sharing. My second grade teacher was a man named Don Clarkson. And up until that point, and I think it might have been third grade actually, I didn't know how to tie my shoe. I I couldn't tie my shoes because of the dexterity that was necessary. And my parents used to triple knot my shoes. I remember before I went to school and said, do not untie your shoes no matter what happens. And I used to have friends help me or something. And Mr. Clarkson, out of the generosity of his heart, and I didn't even know that he knew about this. He went home and he practiced with his own shoe. And one day he showed up to the classroom, took me out into the hallway, just he and I thought I was in trouble for some reason. And he put 2 chairs down and he said, I got it, and he said, I figured out a way for you to tie your shoes. And he started working with one clenched fist and working with the loops and the laces and pulling it tight. And he had gone home at night to work with his own shoes to help a kid in his classroom. And, that's the way I use to this day to tie my shoes is the way Mr. Clarkson taught me back in elementary school. And there's so many examples of that. I played high school football at Flint Central High School. I'd never played football before. My baseball coach was a football coach. And they told me, you're playing football this year. You're going to play quarterback and, we'll figure out how you can get the snap and we'll figure out how you can make the handoff to the running backs. And it was one of the greatest sporting experiences of my life to play Friday Night Lights, to play, on a really good high school football team. So there's millions of stories like that in my life. I know that you work a lot with accessibility and the people may be listening to this. And the first step is creativity. It really is an open-mindedness. There is frustration in not being able to button a cufflink or do those things. But it's been my experience and the kids that I've met around the country that there always seems to be a way. They're with a little bit of creativity and open-mindedness. There's a way to get things done.
Yeah. Oh, that's just a great message. Tell us, if you will, about being drafted to Major League Baseball and kind of what that experience was like for you. It's really an honor to talk to someone who's as accomplished as you. So I'd just love to hear your experience with that.
Oh, well, thanks. I was actually drafted twice, and then it goes hand in hand. The first time I was drafted was out of high school.
Oh, okay.
I was drafted by the Toronto Blue Jays, and it was kind of a big deal because not many people. Flint was a great sports town, as you know.
Yes.
Maybe not a great baseball town, although we had good quality baseball. So to be drafted from there was interesting. But I had a chance to sign with the Toronto Blue Jays or a chance to go to the University of Michigan, and now I'm going to get my Michigan plug in here.
We'll edit that out.
Best decision my mother ever made for me. Let's put it that way. I went down to Michigan. Michigan had a good baseball program at the time, and it was absolutely the right decision to make. And I needed to grow up. I needed to get stronger mentally and physically. That allowed me to play on the United States teams, which were amateur teams back then. And then then I was drafted after a few years at Michigan. So, I think about it a lot in these terms, and it always says, "Would you dream to play in the major leagues?" And it was, of course, but that's just what it was. It was a dream, and my goal, I really truly feel like, was always the next level. It wasn't like I'm going to go to the major leagues, just watch what I do. It was like I want to make that team, and having success there, and then trying to make the next one and the next one, and so those initial steps were important. And it wasn't until I played for the United States team in the Olympics and I played with other kids, ball players who were going to be drafted, that I felt like, okay, I feel like I could do okay in the professional ranks. And so it was incremental. It wasn't, one straight shot.
Yeah. Yeah. At what point did you realize that you had that talent and ability, to make it in the major leagues? Was it when you were in high school and you were being drafted, or, what point did that really dawn on you?
No, it was not at all. I was full of doubt, and I wanted to prove myself. Sure. I felt like I had talent. I was confident. But when I was in high school, we had a really good Connie Mack baseball team, which was an 18 and under team back then. And I really wanted to play for that team. That's who I wanted to play for. And so it took success at each of those levels. And it wasn't even, and then when I got to the major leagues, facing guys who I'd seen on TV and guys who I'd collected their baseball cards and, who held this indelible impression in my imagination, to actually pitch against them and play with them. That takes some time too for you to get over that. And at least that's the way I felt. I know there's probably a lot of people say, I'm going to show everybody what I can do. And there's certainly aspects of that. But I think it's important to share with people who might be watching this is that you see people who find success in whatever they do, and you think it was a gilded path. You think it was, oh, well, they must just be super talented, or it was, most of the time there's an awful lot of setbacks that are involved. And for looking back at my own career, it certainly felt that way to me too.
Yeah. So you mentioned doubt. Did that doubt stem from your disability?
I'm not sure. It's tempting to make the correlation and say, hey, was how I felt. I know I felt insecure growing up. Mm-hmm. I certainly know how it feels to be left out, and a lot of people have it a lot worse than me. Believe me, I get it. I was very fortunate, all things considered. But I knew what it was like to be on the outside looking in and wanting to prove yourself. And I spent a lot of quiet time shooting baskets or throwing a ball against a wall or reading about sports. And so, yeah, I believe that there were mental obstacles to overcome. I truly believe that. But I don't know that I would have played in the places that I played had those obstacles not been there. I believe that they pushed me. Sure. I believe that they gave me an ambition and a drive. Wasn't always pretty, but it was something that drove me. There's no question about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, our podcast is about accessibility, and I'd love to hear from your perspective, maybe what our listeners could do or think about in their lives to make places more accessible for someone, who may have a missing limb. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, it all starts with attitude. It all starts with open-mindedness. Mm-hmm. I've done some work with, the United States Department of Labor with their disability employment initiatives. And, mm-hmm. So I had a chance to work with and see some unbelievable employers around the country and big-time employers, Walmart and different types of people who made it a point to provide accessibility. And every situation's unique, whether it's on an assembly line or it's in a boxing plant or in an office. But person after person and company after company all came back with the same thing and said, yes, it's the accommodations that we felt were going to be so insurmountable were oftentimes very minute. The little tiny things that we had to do to open a door for somebody were nothing compared to what we had built up in our brain about what was going to happen. And so worth doing in terms of culture and creativity and what hiring somebody with a different ability brings to an office or a workplace. So, it's hard to say specifically what each person or company or employer can do. Oftentimes it's not that much. Right. The people that they are bringing in are used to finding answers and used to finding solutions. And not only are they going to do that for themselves, they're going to help you look at things differently and bring that solution-minded approach, to your organization. And that's a big thing.
Yeah, that goes right back to the comment earlier about creativity, right? So the creativity to make those changes for a person's job duties does correlate, hopefully, to the bottom line of the business as well. You've also talked about attitudes. We've done some work at the ADA Center around implicit bias. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to mitigate implicit bias, whether it's in the workplace or just within society, and maybe what that's looked like in your life.
Sure. It's a difficult concept, and I believe that things are so much better than they were, My mom and dad, when I was a kid, sent me to a place called the Crippled Children's Hospital. I mean, that's literally what it was called. And they have a picture of it. I mean, it was,
Wow.
So, and I believe that kids are growing up more educated, more tolerant, and open-minded to people of different abilities and different genders and ethnicities. I think things are getting better.
Yeah.
But there's still those biases that lie deep within us. And I think we all need to work to move beyond those things, hopefully find stories of people who have defied those biases, and not just a story like mine or a story like, some of the other stories you read, but more closer to home. But most importantly, and I believe it's up to us who might be fighting the bias to not let it affect you, because biases can't stop you. Biases, they may get in the way, they may provide an obstacle, but oftentimes it's how we deal with that bias that allows us to either succeed or not succeed. And so, yes, we're going to run across that awkward second glance in a hallway or a hotel. I still do, I still fight the tendency to stick my hand in my pocket, or, when I walk up to the first tee box at a golf course, to not, think about what other people are. But at the end of the day, how I deal with those biases is up to me, and lingering on them and allowing them to negatively affect me only hurts one person, and that's me. So, I think we all have a responsibility to move past bias. And there's hopefully someday we get to utopia where, everybody is seen on the same level playing field. It doesn't look like it's happening today or tomorrow. So let's deal with it in a positive, constructive way and not let anything stand in our way.
What advice would you have for a young person today who is facing some of those biases and wanting to figure out how to have that positive mental attitude around it, but might be struggling? It's, I think some of us maybe more naturally have that ability to let things slide but what advice do you have for young people?
It's okay to feel bad. It's okay. It's okay to be angry and feel the unfairness of the world. I totally get that, and I'm not a doctor. I probably have no business even speaking about this, but I think sometimes we make it worse by saying, "Oh, I'm feeling down. I shouldn't feel down. Everything's perfect." Not everything's perfect. It sucks sometimes. It really does. And I remember those times, and I still have them. But what I try to say to young kids is, and I've met so many kids around the country. It really was one of the blessings of my career. Every town we went to, I met a family and with a young daughter or son, and they came to the ballparks, whether it was Detroit or Texas or Oakland or New York, Boston, Baltimore, it didn't matter. That's another thing. There's so many people out there like you, more than I ever knew. There are more kids who are born like me than I ever dreamed of. And that's one thing that playing, the big league showed me. But the thing that I've discovered is, and this is just my experience, there was a time when I was young where my hand was a big part of my day-to-day experience. In the classroom, at recess, playing sports, it seemed like everything was new. It seemed like everything took a struggle. And then I got a great group of friends. They accepted me and embraced me, and we started playing sports. And pretty soon, yes, I still felt bad, but it was after a couple days, and then it was after a couple weeks, and then there was a time, I don't know really when, and I said, I really don't think about my hand anymore. I really don't. It's not a part of my everyday experience, and that happens. You can get to that point, and so Don't feel bad if you feel bad. There's going to be some tough days. And for parents, that's the same message I have too, is that it really stinks. It hurts. It hurts, but it's okay to hurt. And the fact that you're hurting doesn't make you weak or not doing what you should be doing. My experience is that hurt goes away and the sun comes up and we start to feel better. And it's going to come up and it's going to get better.
Yeah. Yeah. What advice would you have for maybe coaches who are coaching children that might have a disability and trying to figure out how to bring them into the fold so they're not, kind of, as you mentioned, on the outside looking in?
Well, I hear those stories a lot. I do. I know that a lot of people aren't as fortunate as I am or was with their youth coaches and that sometimes people aren't as open-minded. I would say to a coach or a teacher, the same thing that I would say about an employer. I mean, I like to think that the locker rooms that I played with were better for the diversity and for the different perspectives and different abilities. That's what's beautiful about baseball, by the way. Basically, people of any ability and size can play the game of baseball and play it well and contribute. So what I miss dearly about playing baseball is the locker room and playing with guys from different countries who listen to different music and who come from different parts of the United States, guys from the South and from the North and from California and from, the Dominican Republic and Canada. And we had, guys of every shape and form. And so I believe that makes for a better team. Mm-hmm. And bringing those people together and seeing beyond whatever label is in front, oftentimes that solution to allow a kid to, switch the glove on and off or hold the bat or, bat left-handed or bat right-handed, it's pretty minuscule compared to the benefits that can come, tangible benefits that can come to a team.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's what I love about sports, is the team and the different people coming together. What's your favorite memory from being in the major leagues? Maybe your biggest accomplishment or kind of most special celebration. I'd love to hear that from you.
Well, I pitched a no-hitter for the New York Yankees, and growing up in Detroit, I wasn't much of a Yankee fan. I'll admit it. I know there's a lot of people who aren't. But it's different to play in New York, and it's different to play with the Yankees. And the intensity and the scrutiny and the history is really something. And you can't play there without feeling all of that very deeply. So I pitched a great game. Kind of unexpectedly and pitched a no-hitter in Yankee Stadium. And it was just such a joy. It was just, a no-hitter is this sort of thing that builds up and it keeps building and building and building and the tension keeps tightening and tightening and you feel it in the stands and you feel it with your teammates. And then you have this moment, that it's almost unbelievable to believe what had just happened. And then you celebrate, with your teammates and in the city of New York. And so pitching a no-hitter for the New York Yankees in Yankee Stadium was the highlight of my career. And I really cherish that day quite a bit.
That's awesome. What are you doing these days? What are you up to? I know you've said you've been, speaking, but I'm sure that's been put on a hold because of COVID. But yeah, what are you up to?
Well, it's been interesting. I came to speaking very reluctantly. It wasn't my path, and I had a public speaking teacher in college who probably can't believe that I ever went on to become a speaker, but I did come to love it, and I hope to get it back someday. I really, I was very lucky. I got a chance to speak to some really great people and some great organizations and travel to some great places, and I love to travel. See the world and to do it, to be brought in and share ideas. That was really cool. So I'll be honest, and I miss it. And there's a real hole in my heart right now about not being able to do something that I really came to love to do. But I'm trying to dig deep into some of the things that I actually spoke about, creativity and accountability and finding a new path and doing something different. And so even though my life is smaller right now, I'm trying to do some different things physically. I've got two great daughters. One is at the University of Michigan and enjoying that, which is great. And the other is working remotely, but she's here with us. So we love that. And I do some mentorship. I send a lot of cards, letters, correspondence with kids and families around the country. And really my life is very fortunate and fulfilled. Yeah.
If our listeners wanted to get in touch with you and learn more or have questions, maybe it's a parent or, a young person, how can they find you?
Well, I have a website, jimabbott.net, not .com, .net.
.net, okay.
I have a great lady who I work with, Lily Schermerhorn. She works with a lot of people who reach out to us, and that's probably the best way. I am on Twitter. Heaven forbid. I don't know why sometimes. But I got on Twitter mostly to share stories, and I talk about baseball a little bit there and do some other stuff. But for the most part, I try to share some of the stories that I hear about around the country of kids like me who are out doing fun, interesting things, and groups who are doing great things, like you are there in Colorado, and Lucky Finn is doing in the Lucky Finn Project is doing in Michigan, like Navability is doing in Illinois. There's a lot of great resources out there. There's a lot of great people out there, and so. I would say either through Twitter or, our website.
What's your Twitter handle?
That is a great question. I was afraid you were going to ask me that.
We'll find it. We'll find it and post it in the show notes.
I think it's J at UM31 or something. I'm sorry. It's
no problem.
A lot of Michigan talk, but I think you can find it. I'm not verified. I don't know how you get verified, but I think I have a big enough following where people can. You'll know it's me. You. There's an picture.
Okay, fair enough. Jim, any final words for our listeners, about accessibility and living life with a disability?
Yeah, I just, first of all, I want to say thanks for having me and congratulations on the great work that you're doing. It's not easy. There's, you have children, you have hockey games to drive to, and you have things to do. I understand that it takes great people like that to make a difference in the world. And there's a lot of them out there, and that's really heartening to see. And for people living with a disability, I don't want to sound Pollyanna-ish. I really don't. I understand the difficulties of what it takes to get up and find transportation to work and get to work and find transportation home and to get a fair shot in the world. But it has been my experience to point out how many people are out there doing it and doing great things. From every corner of the United States, there are people with different abilities out there living impactful, wonderful, fulfilled lives, and their disability has nothing to do with that and will never, ever stand in the way. So I'm proud to be a part of that community, and I'm proud to share that message.
Thank you. And I, again, just really appreciate you sharing your experiences with us and spending some time with us today.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Adventures in Accessibility. Tune in next time for another dive into the unknown.
Adventures in Accessibility is hosted by Dana Barton, produced by Emily Schumann, and Mike Shea is our sound engineer. This podcast is a project of the Rocky Mountain ADA Center and is funded under a grant from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. Grant number 90DP0094-01-00. This production is intended solely for entertainment and informal guidance and should not be considered legal advice. The opinions expressed by guests are not necessarily held or endorsed by the Rocky Mountain ADA Center.